Zoya decided, you know, it's nice to officially meet you. And then she goes in to hug her and then told her that she smelled like an orphanage and then called her a half-breed. But eventually, the episode opens with Alina. She's still at the palace, and it's the following morning. So Mrs. Safin, I believe that's her name, and the other attendants come in to get her prepared to meet the king. And so, of course, she's overwhelmed because she didn't grow up like that, coming from an orphanage. She didn't have people, you know, waking her up and dressing her and bathing her and, you know, all this kind of thing. So as soon as Miss Safin saw her, she basically was like, oh my God, when was the last time you had a bath? Like, I mean, it just made her feel like nothing, honey.
Have you ever bathed? What happened to your face? This is going to take more work than I expected.
So they get her out the bed and get her in the tub. They already had the bathroom. They already filled the tub. So they get her in the tub, and the two attendants who are bathing her, they're talking to her in old Ravka, thinking that she didn't understand what they were saying. But she was like, I know I smell like an old horse. You know, I've spent like I spent 100 hours on a horse getting here. And so they're all looking shocked for a minute, like, oh, she understood what I was saying. And then they, you know, continued on. They get her out the tub. And they continue on talking about how she should change her eye color and all this. And eventually, Miss Safin saw that she was getting overwhelmed, and she basically dismissed all the attendants. Of course, Alina was happy, and she thanked her, and she basically said that, you know, no need to thank me. They're a bunch of shrews, and I don't, you know, pick my staff. The queen does, and I guess it's her way of spying on me, keeping an eye on me, or something to that effect.
Thank you. Happy to get rid of the miserable shrews. I don't pick my staff. The queen assigns them. So
eventually, you know, she is able to get her together, and she was able to heal the scars on her face. And so, which was weird, because she said, oh, so you're a healer. And she said, I'm a tailor.
I am a tailor. I can fix, but I can also modify.
So I could fix things, I can mend things. And I'm like, well, what is the difference between that and a healer? Because, I mean, the scars were gone. Like, I don't know, but she is classified as a tailor, not a healer. And she made it a point to point that out. So in the next scene, the conductor, Jesper, Inez, and Kaz, they're on their way to meet a contact of the conductors. So Kaz is basically saying, I'm not hiring you just to get us through the fold. I'm hiring you because you're able to smuggle Grisha's out of the palace, which is the real reason he's there.
I didn't hire you simply to get us across the fold. You're with us because you smuggled Grisha out of the little palace.
And so he was telling him that they need to meet his contact, Nina, and she's a heartrender. And of course they're questioning, like, okay, well, if she works for the king, why would we believe that she wouldn't betray us? And, you know, the conductor goes in to tell him that, you know, she's radical. You know, she feels like people should work for the crown if they want to. They shouldn't be forced into servitude. And so there's that.
Nina's a radical. Thinks Grisha should get to choose if they serve the crown. She despises involuntary service more than she does fearless.
So while he was talking, she was making her way to the meetup spot, which is this hotel on the way. And so the guy at the front desk basically he told her what her fee was, or that she owed some money or something to that effect. And so she used her powers to basically glamour him. He completely, you know, forgot about that, just told her to go on up and asked if there was anything else that he could do for her. Next thing you know, you see her in her room. These three guys who hunt and kill Grishas, they come into the room. And she fought the good fight, but they end up taking her. So by the time the rest of them got there, she was already gone. Initially, they thought that she had just left, but, you know, her suitcase was there. You know, her room was kind of, you know, disheveled. And then they saw, like, a pendant or something that these people wear, these Grisha catchers. And so they realized that she had been taken.
What is it? Luskella. They are ruthless Grisha hunters.
And so now they're trying to decide if they're going to continue on. For $1 million Krugers, they're like, okay, that could, you know, basically that could change all their lives. And so they've decided they're going to continue on. The conductor basically gave them a list of things that he's going to need in order to get them through the fold. And so he basically sent them on their way. And the reason I'm laughing, it'll come up later. Sent them on their way. So the first person we saw was Jesper. He's supposed to get coal, but it's a special type of coal that they need. And so he's going through the markets and he's looking for this coal. And the next thing you know, he hear a game going on. It's a little table game, some gambling going on. And so he kind of passed it and he went back and eventually he got the best of him and he went in.
It's an open table.
And the reason I was laughing before is because Kaz made it a point to talk to Jesper directly and basically was like, this is the task at hand. Go and get the damn coal and come back and, go to the meetup spot. No detours.
Just the coal. No detours.
And so, of course, now he sat up here where he's supposed to be getting this coal, and now he done sat down to gamble, basically. Oh, the next scene is the palace. She's all done, and she's initially walking with Miss Saffron. They basically, just going back and forth. She's telling her about, the expectations and how things are going to palace. And the next thing you know, she disappeared. And next thing you know, the general was walking next to her. And so they talked because he's supposed to be one to walk to present her to the king. Excuse me. And he was basically told her to follow his lead. And she's gonna do fine. So they made it to, the grand hall, and everybody's, there's a ton of people there. They're sitting on their throne, king and queen, and he did what he, of course, they talked to her a little bit, asked her who she was, and of course she didn't really know what to say, and so he, introduced her as Alina and her name and, where she's from, and he did what he, does, which was he could create darkness. He could, I'm assuming that's what he does. He control, this is very Cloak and Dagger. I don't know if you remember that Marvel show, Cloak and Dagger, where the guy controlled, their nightmares and she controlled their dreams. And it's kind of similar to that as far as their powers are concerned. And so he made the room, he basically sucked all the light out of the room, and he was coaching her on how to bring the sun in, to bring light back into the room, which she did with the bang. She did great. And of course, everybody applauded and everybody was all wow, wow. And then eventually she had, haters gonna hate. So while other people were walking up congratulating her and giving her a hug and welcoming her home and, making her feel welcome in the whole thing, Zoya decided, it's nice to officially meet you. And then she goes in to hug her and then told her that she smelled like an orphanage and then called her a half-breed.
Such an honor to formally meet you. You stink of the orphanage. Half-breed.
But eventually Miss Saffron came and pulled her away and basically was telling her what a great job she did. So, girl, you're going to have haters everywhere. So Kaz, he got the goat, which is one of the things that they were supposed to do. And as he was walking, down the street, he could hear someone giving this speech. Back in the day, they would the town, the courtyard or whatever, and the person would stand up and air their grievances, and then the crowd would form, and he's talking about how, I guess this is West Ravka, and so he's saying how they're tired, they need to be their own country because they're tired of spending all the hard-earned money and working and sending all this money to East Ravka, and that they need to break off.
Now is the time to form our own country, to keep what we make and what we earn instead of sending it to the East.
And so, of course, Kaz is watching him, and he watched him as he got off the stage, and then he saw him talking to the conductor, and then they kind of went off into this tent. And so now, Kaz is like, okay, what was that about? What is that all about? Okay, so we finally see where they took Nina. Nina is on a ship, and they're taking her to the lower decks where they have other people chained up. and they're on their way to stand trial for, I guess, being a witch, because the only thing I saw were women down there. And she is fully aware that they are not going to receive a fair trial and will most likely be put to death. So, of course, she is scared to death. She doesn't know what to do or, you know, what's going to happen next.
So you're taking us to Fiona? To our death?
This trial, as our law demands.
So, at this point, it's nighttime. Inez and Kaz are arriving at the meetup location. Jesper is nowhere to be found. The conductor eventually show up and they make their way to the train. And he's now, you know, getting everything prepared. And of course, just as he was about to get, they were about to get aboard, you hear Jesper running, don't leave without me, or something to that effect, with the town folks in tow shooting at him.
Wait for me! See the train.
And so the conductor now is trying to, he put the light out because he said he doesn't want them to be able to see the train. They can't really make out, because it's pitch black out there. They can't really make out what's going on out there. So he made his way there and got in, and they closed the door. And so, of course, they're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. He is upset, having to admit that he gambled all of the money.
I lost a little bit of the money. I lost all of the money.
And he ended up having to steal the coal they needed, but it wasn't even the right amount. He was supposed to get 20. It was only 16. And of course, now they're asking the conductor if they can make it on 16. And he's like, it's never been tried before, but at this point, what are their options? You know, they can go out and risk getting shot by the people who stood out there shooting at the train, or take their chances. And so they decided to take their chances on the train. So, it's time for Alina to start her training. And so I forget the two the women named that, you know, got her and to escort her out to training. And I think the trainer, his name is Botkin. And he's basically telling her that she needs to be prepared. She has to obviously learn to work, you know, use her powers. She has to learn how to, I guess, manifest them as quickly as possible. Obviously, lives depend on it. Her life depends on it. And so he told her to choose a sparring partner. And of course, Zoya stepped up. And so, of course, she's a cartographer. She's not a fighter. So she, when they asked her if she had any fighting experience, she flashed back on when Maul was giving her pointers, but she ain't never been in a real fight. So of course, Zoya, who's bragging about how she's been training since she was 3 years old or 5 years old or something, she had no problem taking her down. But Alina kept getting back up. So the second time she got up, she ended up flipping her over. And then she made some comment about Maul. It was like, I put your tracker friend on his back too, which of course she didn't.
Your tracker friend also liked it when I put him on his back.
I'm like, what was the point of saying that? It's not like they're in a relationship. But so she, you know, she said that because she felt like, I don't know, she's going to make her jealous of, I don't know. Oh, excuse me. So eventually she gets up again. Alina got up again, and she ends up using her abilities on Alina and throwing her back into a stack of hay. And so of course the other one, they run over to make sure she's okay. And they were like, well, she's just jealous because she has a thing for the general. And I guess whatever the attention that they're showing her, Alina is, you know, bugging her. And of course, it kind of rubbed her the wrong way as well when she was trying to bed Maul. And he kind of just took her grapes and walked off and gave them to Alina. So she's had, I guess, a bone to pick with Alina. Anywho, but Botkins wasn't having it. He was like, she's the sun summoner. She's not the enemy and no more than I am. And basically, he just told her to leave class. So he ends up throwing her out of class for that day.
What's what you thinking? Against the sun summoner? Have you lost your minds? She's not the enemy any more than I am. Go!
And Alina, she was done with training too. She ended up going inside. So Alina is now in the library, and she has this weird encounter with the librarian who was like, he introduced himself, and he's saying that he's the king's spiritual advisor, and how, he still want them to be friends, and how they need to be friends. It was kind of weird.
I want us to be friends. It is important that we are friends.
right? And so, of course, it was kind of off-putting, and so you can see her kind of backing away from him. And then he pulled this book off the shelf talking about the Bonesmith. And the Bonesmith was this, they're saying, is the first recorded Grisha, and how he crafted these magical creatures out of, the reason he's called the Bonesmith is because he was able to craft these magical creatures out of the bones of his fingers.
He made creatures from his own finger bones.
And people found that if they were able to kill these creatures and I guess meld the bones to their body, that they were able to absorb the power from those creatures and it amplified their powers. And so he also said that only, of course she thought that was barbaric, and he was like, well, you know, and only the Grisha who kills the animal is the only person who could absorb the powers.
Only the Grisha who takes that life can take that creature's power.
And so he then told her that it's time for her to go to, what's her name, Bagra for additional training. So I guess Botkins handles like the hand-to-hand combat and weapons and that nature, and Bagra handles the powers, showing them how to manifest their powers, how to control their powers. And so that's where she's on her way to now. So she's now sitting there in, you know, she's talking and she's asking her questions about what her name, where she's from, about her parents. And then she's, you know, asked her, like, who is she? And she was like, and the way she said it was kind of timid, like, I'm the sun summoner. And she was like, and then she starts asking her, you know, are you able to manifest your powers on your own without the general holding your wrist? Because he has the ability to amplify the powers. And so that's how she was able to, you know, do what she did in front of the king. But she did admit that she doesn't know how to manifest the powers on her own. And she could feel that, you know, the uncertainty in Alina, and she basically said that she needs to figure out who she is and don't come back until she do.
Everyone believes that you are the one. Come back when you believe it too.
So that was the end of her training there. Okay, so back on the train, they are, you know, moving along, and eventually, they end up being attacked by the Velcro. So now it's like up in the air, like whether or not they're gonna make it. Do they have enough coal to make it? It's a hot mess. So we flash back to the palace. It's now time for dinner. They're sitting down to have dinner, and a guy stands up to read off the updates. There were a number of casualties. The 36th battalion, which I'm assuming is the battalion that Maul is a part of, is in. It was listed. He wasn't listed, but the battalion was listed as having casualties. And he also went down the list of the number of Grisha who were murdered.
So among the dead, 6 healers, 4 inferni, and 3 heartrenders.
And then he had the goal to put her on the spot, basically saying that, like, why is she here eating twigs when she should be spending every waking moment training?
Why are you here eating figs? You should be training every waking moment to tear down the fold.
And so you can see that she's overwhelmed, like all of these expectations of her, of these powers that she didn't even know she had until like a week ago. And so she is feeling overwhelmed. So the Valkyrie flash to the train. They're still trying to figure out how they're going to, if they're going to make it. The Valkyrie is still attacking the train. Everybody's starting to freak out. Eventually, you know, they've used all the coal, and you know, it's basically at this point whether or not they're going to make it to the other side. So, I mean, with having nothing to lose, Jesper eventually stands up and he just starts shooting. You know, he's a crack shot. Sharpshooter, so he's he is doing what he needs to do. It's like, yeah, at this point, you know, if they're able to get in here, they're gonna kill us anyway. So let me, you know, try to get as many as I can. Hopefully, it'll be enough for us to get to the end point. So, and eventually, it was. So they did make it to the other side. Just barely. So we flash back to the palace. Alina is now in her room, and she's now penning another letter to Maul, and she's basically talking about how she feels overwhelmed, and how because people have all these expectations of her, how she's going to be the savior. And
if saints were once real, they've long since left us. Yet now, everyone is looking at me like I'm the answer.
You know, how, you know, being on her own has been a lot because they've always had each other. They've always been together. And how, you know, he was explaining to her the difference between, is it Cardinal North and True North? And Cardinal North is on the map, and True North is where home is, and how she's always felt at home with him, and how she basically needs to get back. She needs to go home. She needs to be with him.
You have always been my true north, Mal.
I'll find my way back to you.
And if I am to survive this, I need to be home again.
And so, and that's pretty much how this episode ends. I don't know if that means that she's gonna try to make a run for it, or what's going to happen at this point, but I think they didn't push Alina to the breaking point, and it's like all these expectations are just too much for her. So I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.